All right. Welcome, everybody, to PHP Roundtable, episode 93 for September 2024. Got a great topic for everybody today. Actually, a topic we've had on the books now for months, thanks to TJ, who brought this one up. And all of a sudden, since Laracon, I'm not sure why, but since Laracon, and especially this last week, this topic has just blown up. We're going to talk about TUIs, text-based user interface, and command line. And we have our normal panelists, TJ Miller.
Yeah, what's up?
Sarah Goldman.
Hark loudly, dear friends.
And our special panelist, fresh off the Laracon US tour, Jess Archer.
Hello.
And Joe Tannenbaum.
Nailed it. How's it going?
So good at this. All right, we can wrap it up. I didn't mess it up. I didn't mess up. So.
All right, great podcast. See you, folks.
Jet, now I've known Jess for a while.
Yep.
We've exchanged correspondence and met a few times actually in person. I've seen you, Joe. I saw you on stage a couple of weeks ago. I haven't actually got to meet you, but kind of bring everybody up to speed. Although Jess didn't talk about this at the conference this year, Jess is very much behind a lot of the command line stuff in Laravel, specifically the prompt stuff. And Joe, you're kind of a TUI guy, aren't you?
Yeah, you could say that at this point. Yeah, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Like I'm everything I do has just propping me up underneath. But but yeah, I mean, she built out prompts, which is an incredible library, and I took it and just kind of hijacked it for not its intended use and decided to play with it.
I think it's important to mention though that when I was building prompts, Taylor noticed that you were also building your own version of prompts, and we were doing ours in secret. And then he kind of let me know, hey, there's this guy, Joe, also building something very similar to what we're building. We should probably let him
kill
know.
Him.
It's always like this awkward thing if you release your thing and then a month later we release ours.
Let's ice Tannenbaum.
But I looked at your code because yours was open source and you were doing a lot of the same things as me. So if I didn't build it, you would have finished yours. And yeah.
Who
knows?
For
the record, both Joe and Jess work for Laravel, which is really cool. Right?
Yep.
Indeed we do.
I say Joe gave me a look like, wait a minute, I'm not sure we're letting anybody know that yet.
Do I? I don't know. Yeah, that mine is much more recent than Jess has been at Laravel for I'm not even sure how many years now.
Yeah. Over 2 years. I think 2.5 years maybe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm months in. I'm very fresh on the scene in that world.
And have already achieved so much.
So you might notice a couple of us on the panel, not gonna mention any names here, but a few of us have some gray on us, right? I mean, we've been doing this. The terminal has always been a very comfortable area for me. I was a Vim user for years. NeoVim convert over the last couple of years. But being at the terminal, that's where I enjoy working. I mean, it just seems, it's not that I enjoy it. I just don't think about it. It's just where I've always kind of worked. And GUI's always kind of felt like bulky and slow. But I didn't know what a TUI was. I didn't know TUIs were a thing. I came across a couple of Go applications where I'm like, this is weird. And then I came across a LazyGet and it blew my mind. I'm like, wait a minute. I can click on stuff with my mouse? What the hell's going on here?
TUIs, back in my day, we just called them applications.
When did all this TUI thing happen? What brought this to the industry and what changed with what we're doing to allow us to interact with the terminal differently?
In terms of mouse interactions and all that sort of cool stuff?
Is that what you call when you click on things with the mouse?
Yeah, so I guess like, originally computers were like console based only, right? Like that was the only interface. And then you got GUIs, graphical user interfaces, but the terminal was kind of always there. But they were pretty basic, but it has kind of evolved a bit over the years to get things like mouse support, and all sorts of features. Like, what have we got now? I don't know, you can have like URLs in your terminal that you can click on. Some you like right click and have like context menus. There's like libraries that still like make it feel like it is a GUI application. So things like ncursors, there's a lot of apps built using ncursors that kind of lets you simulate a real UI. And yeah, things like right click menus, all that sort of stuff. It's been there for a while though. Like it's pretty old technology. Even some of the mouse stuff I feel like at this point is, I don't know, like maybe 20 years old, maybe not quite that old, but like it's been around.
I wasn't aware of the mouse support for text-based applications. That's a new one on me. But
Right?
like ncurses is an extension we used to bundle directly with PHP up until like early 5 something.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I think not enough people were using it, so it's probably a good thing that we have this resurgence.
I think like a lot of things have always been primarily in the terminal, right? Like, a lot of people still use Git in the terminal. A lot of things are just front ends for terminal things. So the terminal's kind of always been there. And at least for me, the terminal's always just been this magic place. Like I still remember being a teenager and seeing someone using the terminal. And I was like, that just like looks cool. It's like the Matrix. It's got all these cool hacker vibes. I feel like I'm like actually using like telling the computer what to do. So I've always been fascinated by them and wanted more excuses to use them. And I think developers in general do. So that's why we still use the terminal whenever we install, Composer, Require. We're always jumping into a terminal to do that rather than creating UIs around those things. And so it's kind of natural that as developers, we want to make that experience even better and still keep feeling those kind of hacker vibes. And it also just feels so fast. Like you were saying, like GUIs often just feel heavy and clunky. They often like hide a lot of options. Like I get really frustrated trying to use a Git GUI client because I'm like, I know what I want to do. How do I find like what its representation of that is, which behind the scenes, it's just going to be calling Git anyway. Why don't I just go like straight to the source?
Yeah.
I think Git was the big one for me. For a matter of fact, I think Git was the one where I was trying to explain to somebody how to do something, and they're like, well, what are you clicking? I'm like, what do you mean, what am I clicking? It's a command. And they're like, no, in your Git interface, what are you clicking? And that's when I was like, what are we doing with developers these days that they don't know how to use the command line? I felt very old very quickly, but yeah, it's interesting.
Like nobody knows how to write assembler anymore. I mean, come on.
It's interesting that you say that because I think I would be willing to say, I bet you there was a very large percentage of PHP developers who never touched the command line until Composer became a thing. Like, because
just
everything
FTP to production, no SSH, yeah,
live in FileZilla.
Yeah, I always found that writing quick command line scripts was a much faster way for me to like prove something out. If I was just kind of toying with an idea or wanted to see what was possible, just like writing little scripts for the command line was infinitely faster than, because I would get distracted by like building out a UI or like the styling of it, or it didn't really matter in the command line. I could just try it and see if it worked and then take sort of the core of that and move it to where it ultimately needed to go. So I don't know. I've always like just been dabbling in that realm first and then moving it elsewhere if it needed to go elsewhere. And often it kind of stayed there most of the time because it didn't really need to go anywhere else,
I think that like the scripting thing's a really good point because it does let you kind of prove out this idea and then it's repeatable. It's like this macro of like building up all these individual steps and then you can replay that as many times as you want. Whereas in a GUI, it's like click this, click that. And then if you want to do it again, well, back to square one sort of thing.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many like features and just me teasing out how code's going to look or function happens in artisan commands. Like before anything, like before any routes, it starts as a command and just kind of figure out what it's going to look like from there. It's definitely like the place that I go to start.
Yeah.
The other thing with like terminals as well, I think that made them so kind of appealing is often you'd have like a web server that doesn't have a UI. So the ability to SSH into another server and use like, edit text or, fix a config file or edit a live file in production was just really cool, that it was like the same environment as you were using locally, and those would never have a UI. So it just became this kind of thing of like, if I know how to use SSH and I can use it like proficiently to edit stuff, then I've got these like superpowers.
Yeah, that's what turned me on to Vim and NeoVim. Was exactly that. Like I had to do work on servers, and what are you going to use, Nano or Vim? And Vim just seemed like a far better choice, and that was it. I've been using NeoVim ever since, like regular Vim. But yeah, that all got started. Like I had servers to manage and like config files to edit, and I just got hooked from there.
So I know TJ, your NeoVim. Jess, I know I've stolen some of your NeoVim configuration.
I've stolen a good amount of hers too.
Sarah,
I've stolen from everyone.
You're a Vim person, right, Sarah?
I'm Vim, and you know what? My entire Vim RC is a single page because I want to be able to just go anywhere and not have to be like, oh, this is nothing like my environment. Like I want something that is as stock as it can be because I can count on that.
Joe, are you a Vim person?
I'm about to get kicked out of this roundtable. So
my
hard.
God!
Unless you
don't say it.
I can't say it. I won't say it. I don't use Vim, but I use something else, and it's just. I know everybody's shocked when I say that, but I.
Is it Notepad?
I haven't. What it's Notepad. I just use raw Notepad, no syntax highlighting. Just
Are you an Emacs person?
No. Oh man. Yeah. No, do you want me to say it? I don't really want to say it. I don't want to get booed. I hear it's. I use VS Code. I do. It's
Can we get a censor on that, please?
Yeah. Is there a moderator in this thing? Why? How did I say in here? Yeah, I use VS Code, and everybody's surprised when they hear that. But I'm sure if I like dove in and spent the time, I'd probably love it. And I just don't have that. I mean. You would think I have that kind of time because I'm always, goofing off with this stuff, but I just don't have like the brain space to like learn that right now. But yeah, someday.
What you don't have is the motivation to do it. If you knew what you would get out of it, then you would make the time.
You know what I should do? You have a course on Lyricast, right? For
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I should cruise through that and take a look, and I probably would spark something for me.
Yeah, the first couple of like videos are kind of showing you why you would want to use it. So like if you watch those, then hopefully that might hook you, and then the rest of it kind of tells you then how you would set it up.
Okay. It's a lot of like config tinkering, right? Like that's all I hear is like just constant config tinkering.
Yeah. I mean, it depends. If you like really want to make it yours, for sure. Yeah. Like there's like, as I've been doing a little bit of streaming, there's been times on stream where I'm just like, I got to put together a hotkey for this. Like, give me a second. Like, I've got to go tweak it now because it's all muscle memory. So I don't want to like get set in a habit that I don't want. So it's there's if you want it to be a ton of tinkering, you can totally make it a ton of tinkering. Or like Sarah said, she just keeps it, super simple config file, and that works too.
Listen, Joe, we're not disappointed. We're just mad. So.
At least go install Vim key bindings.
That's fair. Okay, sure. I'll do that for you. No problem.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, really, you can. I don't typically recommend this, but I honestly don't know what it's like anymore. In fact, I just talked about this on PHP Ugly a few weeks ago with a PHP Storm and VS Code. You have the Vim bindings. Like if you're trying to understand the basic principles around Vim, I know for PHP Storm, the Vim emulator is just fantastic. Hands down, the best Vim emulator I've seen of all these Vim emulators. I used to use VS Code. I tried VS Code's Vim emulator a few years now back. I'm sure it's just as good, but if you're trying to understand just the movement and how to do things, it probably is a good starting point, because if you get frustrated, it's easy enough to turn off.
Right. I know enough to be dangerous. Like I do a lot of like editing on the server in Vim, so I know enough to like get around. But like I'm sure if I watched like Jess or TJ, it's like they're just in a different world.
Sick. It's sick watching.
I'm not doing the same thing at all. Yeah.
Yeah. I told TJ the other day, I'm like, listen, so I'm horrible at Vim. When I say Vim, I'm saying like NeoVim and Vim, but I'm horrible at it because I will completely blow away my config file and then try a whole new setup. And I do that like pretty consistently every 6 months. And to TJ's point, there's certain like muscle memory things I implement every time I do that. And then I start trying new things, right? Like, the last new thing that I tried that really stuck, and this has been years now, is changing my leader key to space. And it's like, once you do that, it's like, it just makes so much more sense to have that be your leader key. But where was I going with that? Yeah, I just told TJ last week, I'm like, all right, dude, I need to restart my Vim configuration. Send me your dot files, because that was the smoothest PHP implementation of Vim I've seen. And he still hasn't done it because he's a dork.
I'll tell you,
you
I
go
got
into
most of it
RC
from
and you ask
Jess.
yourself, does this line spark joy?
Well, with NeoVim, it's a little different now. It's not that simple anymore. It's better or worse, right? Because NeoVim is actually using a different. You can use the old Vim language, but NeoVim by default uses what's it used? It's not
Lua.
Rust. It's Lua. Yeah. So if you're a developer, it's easier to look at it and understand what's going on. Whereas with the Vim scripting language, it's like learning another language. But yeah, it's different. I don't know. I'm still kind of getting used to it. And everybody watching the stream live, we tricked you. You thought this was going to be too easy command line. No, it's a Vim talk. It's a Vim talk.
Gotcha. I was a plant. That's why I'm here.
All right, let's get back on track here. Okay, Vim aside, just as a general thing, command line or TUI, what do you use every day that you don't think you would want to use a GUI version of?
SSH.
Good.
Oh yeah,
that's good. I'm good with that.
Y'all don't use like SSH in a GUI?
It's called putty. If you're not familiar,
I think you can like create like you can connect to a remote X server over an SSH tunnel. So that's kind of GUI over SSH.
God. I remember those days.
But that's because SSH can do everything.
Yeah,
this is true.
Very much. Mine's
so I basically, it's not 100% true, but I pretty much say that I only need a terminal and a browser on my computer to do everything I need to do. There's other things like Slack and whatnot. And saying I only need a terminal is just the way of interfacing with a whole suite of applications that are inside the terminal. So, things like tmux to create like multiple tabs and have resumable sessions and switch between different projects, NeoVim, Git, and then just like all the standard stuff. Like, if you want to like have a log file streaming, using things like Tail, that will automatically like output new lines in a log file as they get written to the log file. I can kind of see them on screen. Things like Docker to spin up services and all those sorts of things. There's like countless CLI apps that I couldn't live without.
Agreed. I have like a slew of when I was a freelancer before Laravel, I had a slew of just like automation CLI scripts that would spin up projects and start my timer and for the exact project that I was working on. I automated everything via the command line, and then it was just like an alias away to just like start a project or continue working on a project, and it was invaluable. It was the fastest way I could have done it, and I was just interfacing with like either APIs or different applications via those little scripts, and I wouldn't have traded that for anything. I didn't want a GUI for that. I just wanted to like have that in the terminal because it was so much faster than anything else.
What would you say would be? We talked about like getting started with Vim, and I gave some recommendations. Somebody who wanted to get more involved with terminals again, like what advice would you give them?
I mean, I would say to just try and pick a few things that you use a GUI for. So like, let's say you have a Git client, a GUI client. That's probably a good example for developers. Try and use the Git CLI more. I don't know how people are viewing logs in a GUI, but tail the logs instead. So just start to like sprinkle in a few things that you'd normally use a Git thing for, a GUI thing for. Find the CLI equivalent and just always have a terminal open, have it easy to get to. I kind of have all these shortcuts so that I can just like quickly switch between browser and terminal without having to like Alt Tab or switch things. It's like one keyboard movement will take me to my terminal no matter where I am, and another one will take me to my browser. So the terminal's just always there. I don't even have to think about it. It's just like I need my terminal and something happens with my hand and it's there.
I would also say, like, if you've really never used the terminal or you're rusty or whatever, even just navigating your computer via the terminal and stop doing it with like Finder, on Mac. Just how fast can you get to a folder? How, do you remember how to create a folder? Do you remember how to change permissions on a file? Do you remember how to look at a file, touch a file? These things are just like the muscle memory things that come when you use the terminal on a regular basis. But if you haven't done it in a while, it'll get you like back in the groove, and it feels like something productive that you're doing because you have to like navigate these directories and files anyway. So just getting used to like how to do that quickly in the terminal is also maybe a good way to just dip your toes back in the water,
And that's a good example. Like for me, who I probably consider myself a terminal first sort of person, things like Finder are frustrating. Like I try to use it. I'm like, why do people use this? Like, this is a terrible idea. And I drop into a terminal every time because it's just so much faster, makes so much more sense. You get so much more information at your fingertips. I don't get it. That's a great. And to your point, Jess, about only needing a terminal in a browser, I was just telling a friend of mine that I mentioned that I switched from a Linux desktop back over to Mac OS because of some stuff. But the thing that made that so simple is because 90% of my workflow is a terminal and browser. So moving over to a proprietary OS like Mac OS really didn't bother me that much from that standpoint, because everything just kind of still, all the tools are still there and they just kind of work the same for me.
When Xterm asks, what is my purpose? And your answer is you open SSH.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I didn't even think about that. So yeah, I try, that's kind of how I try to live my life too. And it has helped me. It helps also when you change computers too.
I was just going to offer you a pro tip for Finder. This will be quick. Shift Command G will let you type in the path that you're trying to get to. Very useful if you need to get like /temp or something.
Oh, it's super helpful. It's one of my favorite secrets.
Yep. Wait. Shift Command
G.
G? Why
yeah,
G?
you can
as in
just
golf.
like
what?
Blew your mind, didn't I? You're welcome.
You've made this a lot more usable. I will say that.
Yeah.
Holy
Does it have like
smokes.
tab completion? Like, can you start typing a bit of it and use tab to complete it?
I can't remember. I
can't remember
actually using tab completion.
Because that's one of the secrets of like navigating.
Oh my gosh,
or
I've
even
never
just
seen this menu before.
In general, is the ability to like type a few letters of the folder or whatever it is and hit tab to complete
it. Have tab completion.
You get tab completion, yeah.
It does have tab completion, yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing.
Oh, that just changed a lot for me. I'm not going to remember that G. That G doesn't make sense.
G for go. Like I want to go somewhere.
Yep.
Go to directory.
Go to directory.
Right. Yeah.
Tilde does what you think it should as well.
I'm curious what terminals is everybody using these days? Like what terminal program?
I'm using WesTerm.
What's that?
Jess.
I'm using Kitty.
Kitty. Okay.
Yeah. So like KITTY, it's got the TTY kind of joke in there.
Thank you
for pointing that out.
I never caught that. Holy smokes. What were you saying, TJ?
I use WesTerm.
WesTerm?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that one.
I don't know that one either.
Yeah, I don't know. I've stumbled across it. It was like one of the earlier like GPU backed ones. So it was like GPU accelerated, and I just kind of hopped on the bandwagon, and like config was super easy to mess with. So I don't know, just kind of settled in with it, and it's bopped around in my dot files ever since. But Kitty is awesome too. I definitely recommend
that. Sarah?
I just use the terminal app that comes with macOS.
I'm on Linux, Tilix, and on macOS, iTerm. What about you, Joe?
I was iTerm for a long time. I've since switched to Warp because, which I know some people are like iffy on, but I liked it as when I was freelancing. They have this feature that allows you to spin up like YAML configured pre-configurations really quickly. So they're like launch configurations. So you could say like, open these directories, run these commands, split it into 4 panes, and you could just have that like a keystroke, which I liked. And then their AI integration is like pretty strong. It's honestly the best integration I've ever seen, where you can kind of like naturally talk to it. Like I was working with FFmpeg a lot recently, which I never remember how all of that goes. And I was like, I need FFmpeg to do this, and it would like spit it out, and it was accurate, I would say, like 99% of the time. So it just saved me a lot of time, and I like that sort of thing right now.
I keep wanting to try Warp, but I live so much of my life is in Tmux. So not only do I use terminal, but it's Tmux. And again, shout out to Jess. She changed my entire workflow, because I used to be this guy in Tmux that I would much like the browser. I would have like 80 different tabs open in Tmux, and she gave me this one little script called T session, or that's what I call it, T session, where you could type that in, and it would let you you pointed it to a directory, which is typically your project directory, let you find your project, hit it, and it would create a new Tmux session for that project, and let you you can then switch between your Tmux sessions. And now instead of 20 like tabs, I only have like 10 Tmux sessions running, which is awesome. So much better. I use that. That's something I use every day to this day, thanks to you.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, I got that from the Primeagen, so I can't take full credit for it.
Oh, really?
Like everything in this world, I stole it from him. He probably stole it from someone else. So
absolutely.
Actually,
I saw that guy at
Laricon.
He's way shorter than I thought. I'm pretty sure I could take him if I needed to. So you don't have to worry about it. I got your back. Yeah, Tmux. I even forget that I use Tmux every day. Like I don't open up. I have that plugin where as soon as my terminal launches, Tmux launches and restores all my sessions after a reboot. So I'm right back where I was. I love Tmux. And to your point, Joe, for the same reason, I have certain keystrokes I can do that will open up panels in a pattern in directories that I need. It's fantastic. So I can definitely see the appeal to Warp for somebody who's not using Tmux.
So Joe, you kind of mentioned something that I think is kind of a problem people have with CLIs. So with like you mentioned FFmpeg and how you can't remember all the options. And to me, that is the challenge. Like it's the challenge with using CLI stuff is that some things aren't as discoverable as they are in a GUI. In a GUI, you can just have these big buttons that are really obvious that they want to be clicked and they describe what they do. Whereas in the CLI, often it's like arguments, and you'll type your command and -- help, and you'll get like 5 pages of like switches to do various things.
Yeah.
And so then I'm often like piping that through grep to try and find like the one that I care about. That trying to use a command for the first time is often probably slower than doing it in a GUI. But if you use that thing enough, then later on it becomes faster than using a GUI. So I think that's probably like a general truth. And that kind of segues me to like prompts and how that got created and how it works in Laravel. I know we're not like a Laravel podcast here, but we're a PHP, so Laravel's fair game.
It's all family.
Exactly. So Laravel has a lot of commands to scaffold things like make a model, make a controller, all that sort of stuff. And so those have a whole lot of like arguments you can pass to it. So it's like make controller, and then you can type the name of the controller. And if it's a resource controller, you can go like -r or whatever it might be. And I think like one of the common ones is when you make a model, you can like the make model command is kind of like this God one that it can go and create controllers and migrations and all these other things from one command. So you end up going artisan make model, the name of your model, and then you like tack on like 5 different switches to go and create all the different things. But I found that I pretty much would always type artisan make model -- help to get the list, and then I would construct the thing that I want because I just couldn't remember all the different options and what they would do. So
right, but that's part of a double-edged sword, though, right? Because like the GUI is going to make everything super discoverable, but it's not going to give you as much power. People intentionally hold back features from GUIs.
Yeah. And if you want to like do it more frequently, like you're going and ticking a whole bunch of boxes and that, whereas in the CLI, you can kind of create an alias now that if you're always doing the same switches, you can create an alias for it.
Yeah.
But a pattern that I really kind of like that we built with Laravel that kind of inspired me to build prompts was if you type artisan make model without any arguments, instead of like the normal thing of getting an error, like, what's the name of the model? We built it so that it would prompt you. So if you just type nothing in artisan make model, it'll then ask you, what's the name of the model? Okay, cool. Do you want all of these things? Do you want a controller, a migration? You could go and use a multi-select. And initially we built that using Symfony's console components that have things like multi-choice. And those are really good, but the multi-choice one in particular, the UI for it kind of always bothered me because it would give you a list, but you kind of had to like type these comma-separated values. And I just wanted to push the up and down arrows and hit the space bar to like quickly choose the things that I wanted. And I later discovered that there's a reason why Symfony does it that way. And it's really to do with like terminal compatibility, especially with Windows. Because you'll notice with Symfony, it'll render the choices, but the only thing that changes when you're interacting with it is the very last line on the bottom of the screen where you're typing the options you want. As soon as you want to go and change things like on a previous line and go up and down, that introduces this whole new layer of complexity where you've got to like erase parts of the terminal and redraw them and all these sorts of things. So long story short, Symfony ones was good to like create this experience where I didn't have to run PHP artisan -- help to find the arguments. And then it was like, okay, can I make this better? I was inspired by in the Node ecosystem, when you create a Vue project, it would ask you, do you want TypeScript, JavaScript? And it was like up and down arrows. Like it felt more like a web-based component select box. And so that's kind of how that all started.
But I will say that
I'm curious.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, in this interactive process of like, what model do you want? That. At the very end, do you say like, hey, this is the command I'm about to run? Because like that feels like
but that would be cool.
Yeah,
this is true. It would kind of give you like, this is the generated command running this now, and then you could copy paste that and create an alias for it if you wanted. Yeah, that's a good point.
I like that. What are you going to say, Joe?
I was going to say that Jess and I were sort of creating similar libraries at the same time, although obviously hers is more finessed than mine was. It was a little, but the thing that she cracked is that sort of graceful erasing and re-rendering over, because that's what you have to do with these TUIs. And I didn't understand why mine was like breaking in funny ways once it reached a certain, and I hadn't gotten that far. And once I had gotten that far, I was like, I know this is coming down the pipeline first party from Laravel, so I don't know if I want to explore this more. But just really with prompts, like it's a hard problem. If you render outside the bounds of the terminal, everything just scrambles. Like it just looks insane. And Jess figured out a way to really gracefully get that cycle going of like, what have I printed? What's now static? What is now dynamic within what we've printed? And just kudos to like really, it's just a beautiful mechanism inside of prompts that is very understandable to look at. Yeah.
It feels a lot like React or Vue in terms of the life cycle, where they have these like render loop that it kind of goes through, and every change kind of triggers a new re-render. And it was the same kind of idea of like changing a bit of data triggers a re-render, and it then uses that new bit of data when it's doing the redraw. So that kind of paradigm felt really good. And yeah, but terminals to like do that sort of thing, I don't know if we want to get into like ANSI escape sequences and like how you communicate with the terminal, but you're effectively just like echoing out these like secret strings that the terminal, instead of displaying out to the user, is like, oh, you want me to like make this text red, or you want me to like erase this line, or you want me to erase move the cursor up and then erase everything down. Exactly. So, but they're these like really kind of obscure strings that generally just have a bunch of numbers in them that mean different things. And you kind of have to know that, yeah, like 39 might be red or something. I don't know. That's probably wrong, but
it is. You're right.
It is.
Red? No.
Yeah. 39 is red. Yeah.
Yep.
It's high intensity red.
High intensity. There you go. Okay, cool.
Yes. Specificity.
Yeah.
But when you're dealing with those codes and you're trying to stay within the bounds, you need to measure the actual string printed, but you have to print that out without measuring those codes themselves. So it becomes this sort of like weird game of like, what am I measuring here? And I have to strip it all out, measure it, put it all back together, print it out. It's
the other fun thing about like measuring is like normally we think of like strings in terms of their length, but in a terminal you care about the width. So you could have an emoji that if you're using like a multi-byte string and counting its length, it counts as like one character, but it takes up 2 columns in the terminal. So you want that to be 2 rather than 1. And there's just a whole lot of cases where you care about the width rather than the length. Makes it a fun challenge to solve. And the whole multi-byte versus non-multi-byte string thing as well, it just there's so many like nuances that you kind of have to learn the hard way, where everything works fine and then you chuck an emoji in and then all the calculations are off by 1 and yeah.
Yeah, who knew using emojis in the terminal?
Well, even like
that alone is like wild, right?
Japanese symbols, they're often multi-width symbols as well. There's countless things where it can bite you.
When I submitted the text area PR for prompts, Jess was like, "There's no multi-byte word wrap, and we need to write that ourselves if we want to use this." And I was like, Cool. Yeah, let's write multi-byte word wrap. And
Isn't that in the Intel extension? I feel like that's part of the grapheme package from ICU.
Maybe we built our own, but
yeah, we rolled our own because we were like, we don't know what's going to be on people's systems, so we should just roll something that is just part of it. But
true, ICU is not a guaranteed.
There was a multi-byte word wrap there, I think, but there wasn't a width-based word wrap.
Right.
I think that was
it was measuring the
differentiation.
The wrong thing.
Okay.
But the other thing that makes it just kind of like, for whatever reason, I decided that it would be cool if like all the text inputs had like borders around them. And there's all these lovely like box drawing symbols that you can do to draw boxes and they'll line up nicely. But if you've got some text and you've got like a whole bunch of them and you want a line on the other side of the screen that lines up down every single line, you've got to pad them with spaces on the end of every line until you get to the box drawing character. So it's not just like in a browser where you can draw a div and put a border around it and it's like automatically a square. If you put one of these box drawing characters on the end of every line, it's going to be this like ragged edge unless you like pad them all out.
I feel like now's the time to ask, are you guys familiar with TurboVision?
No, teach me.
No, that's it. Mid to late 80s, Borland came out with a set of libraries for all their languages. I was using Pascal, but like they had it for C and a bunch of other stuff, called TurboVision, which was a text UI library. And it was dope. Like the thing could redraw. It had mouse support, actually, now that I think about it. You could drag a window around the screen and its refresh drawing was super clean and super smooth. And this was like on 286s, 386s. These were not powerhouse PCs. But it was also like writing directly to raw frame buffers. So, it didn't have to go through the kernel to get to the display, which is a different era.
Wow.
I'm very glad that people solved all of these problems before us so that sit on top of that, luckily.
I know there are modern ports of TurboVision because people kind of loved it. So there's probably like an implementation you could find out there in some OSS archive. Just FYI. See, the gray hairs, they come with knowledge.
Every now and then. I don't. So for people watching the show, we get together before the show goes live. And we have a quick powwow on, especially for the guests panelists on how the show runs. I'm as well documented very bad at this whole podcasting thing, and I always forget to introduce people. And I don't think we all kind of know each other, but I'm not sure if Jess and Joe know Sarah. Sarah is been part of the PHP internals team for like since PHP 0.05, right?
I did a tiny little bit of stalking beforehand, so I did know that piece of information.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Clutch my pearls.
I'm always very impressed with the breadth of knowledge that Sarah pretends to have. It's very impressive.
I love how you just dropped pretend in there. That was great.
Oh, did I say? I thought I said that inside. I didn't realize it came outside. Sorry.
That's like a backhanded
It's true,
compliment,
but you know.
No, she's very, very intelligent. Jess, you said something that like gave me a little jitter earlier because
sorry,
I don't know what it is. No, it's me. It's my. We talked about muscle memory and things like that, and being at the terminal. To this day, I know the switches you're talking about with artisan make model, and I'm not even sure how long they have been a thing, but they've been a thing for a while. But I don't think they were a thing when I started using Laravel. And to this day, I always do make migration first, create my table, and then go to create the model. And then I'm just like, damn it, I didn't need to do that. And it's so frustrating because it is such a eloquent solution on, just doing a lot of scaffolding all at once as you're making. And you go to the IDE now, the PHP Storm Laravel
idea.
Idea.
That little, if you remember to do make model there, you can even create your database table there and just run it, and it does the fillables and it does the migration all in one blow. I'm rewriting PHPRoundtable's website, and I just did that yesterday, where I ran make model once again before make migration before make model, and I just kick myself every time I do it.
It's probably an opportunity for us to do like a would you like fries with that type thing, where when you do make migration, we're like, hey, would you like a model with that?
I would love that.
Then where does it stop? It's like, do you want a controller too? Do you want this? Do you want that? Like every scaffolding command would basically like become one that references all of the others.
Why
for
not?
an extra 5 CPU cycles, you can supersize it.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, make it so. I'm actually into it. Let's go. They all inform each other. Let's go.
We're talking to the right people here. Let's go.
It'll be done tomorrow.
There you go.
Next release. I'm looking forward to the next release.
That sounds good, because I do the same thing every time. I make the model first, and then I go back. Like, I could have done this all in one go. Especially like living in the command line. It's like, I should have known better. Like, I know all these commands. Like, I haven't aliased this yet. What's wrong with me?
That's actually
There's
another
so many,
good idea.
like,
Alias it. Yeah.
I think when you're building like a command, the default is kind of to just give like an error message when something goes wrong. And there's so many like opportunities to create something more interactive. So like, I was just thinking then, like when we do make model, if the model already exists, I think we just throw an error. There is like a -- force option you can like pass to force it to make the model if it already exists. Because in your scenario, like if you've created the model and you're like, oh, I want the controller, but now if I do the make controller thing, it's like I've got to remember like how to name the controller so that it follows like the conventions.
Good point.
It would be kind of cool if you could just run make model again, and if the model existed and you didn't run -- force, but you are in an interactive terminal session, it could probably just say, hey, this already exists. Do you want me to like force create it? And basically try and remove any error messages whenever it's an interactive terminal. And there is like a subtle difference there, where if you run a CLI command inside like a CI environment where there's no interactive session, then it has to error out. There's no opportunity to like prompt a user. But anytime it's an interactive terminal session, I'm all for like getting rid of any errors, any friction, and just kind of using prompts effectively for all those scenarios.
That's a good
like
point. Yeah. So you actually bring up something interesting though, is if you were to do that, and but it was a application that had already gone through CI, it would then just error out in CI, though, wouldn't it?
If you would running like make model inside the CLI for some reason.
So let's do your scenario where you do make model and it prompts you and says, hey, wait. What am I saying? You wouldn't do that in the CLI.
There is an example.
I mean, go for it. But
if you run PHP artisan migrate and you've got like the production environment variable set so that it thinks you're in production. Locally, if you're in an interactive session, it'll prompt you like the application is in production. Are you sure you want to run this? And you have an opportunity to say yes or no. Whereas in your deploy script, if you run artisan migrate and you don't push the like -- force flag, it can't prompt you, so it just errors out. So you've got to like in that case add the -- force. So there are like places where we kind of already things work differently depending on if you're in an interactive session or a non-interactive session.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what I was talking about there. That does make a lot more sense as I talked through it a little bit.
Making a model in CI is probably. I mean, I could imagine like a test script that maybe is doing that, where like you would non-interactively make a model, but that's probably more rare. But the running the migrations one, I think, is a pretty common one where. Instead of showing an error that like, oh, you need to do -- force because you're in production, where if it's interactive, we can say, hey, instead of showing this error, we'll just ask you. And we always default to the safe option. So like in that case, it defaults to no. So if you're just like not really thinking and you just hit enter, it's going to like default to the safe option. And it gets into this like whole realm of UI and interface design that we normally think of building web apps, of like how to make things intuitive, convenient, but also safe. A lot of that same sort of stuff still applies when you're building a CLI app. There's good ways and bad ways to build CLI interfaces. So yeah, it's a fun little area.
Yeah, and like one of the big differences I always like think about when building CLIs versus like building on the web is like oftentimes in the web you can go back. A lot of times in the CI, like building CLIs and TUIs, like getting back is not really like it's either not an option or it's really difficult to implement, kind of navigating backwards through like CLI steps. It's just like something you really got to think about when you're thinking about the user experience and, throwing errors and catching errors and kind of how you're going to handle all that stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely annoying if you've got like a really long multi-stage form and then you get to the last bit and you like the second last step and you type the wrong thing, and then it's like, well, now I've got to like hit Control-C and start all over from scratch. I know with like some libraries, they've kind of built ways of handling that gracefully. And in prompts, we have a form component that does kind of let you do that. It's not like the most intuitive in a terminal because it's harder to put like big back buttons and cancel buttons and whatnot. But I think we have a keyboard shortcut that we kind of advertise that you can actually go back to previous steps, but only if the developer has written the command using the form helper that kind of keeps track of the state and lets you kind of roll back and step back through it.
And even so, I think if I remember correctly, it just sort of like prints the next one down, but it was the previous question. So it kind of like works its way backward, but it continues forward. Is that correct? Is that how it
it pretty much has to continue forward because it can only go back like so far, especially like if it's there's this whole thing with terminals where you've got like the stuff you can see on the screen inside the little square of the terminal, and then there's like the scroll back history, and you can control what's in the visible area, but something that's like gone outside of the terminal, you kind of lose the ability to like influence what that was. So you end up with this weird scenario where you can, like, if someone scrolls the scroll wheel, look back through the history, you might have a little bit of jank if you've kind of, done some weird stuff
re-rendered
there. So
some stuff in the process of,
yeah. So that's why that thing kind of has this like forward-only approach where like the current step kind of gets cancelled and then it redraws the previous question and fills in whatever you wrote, so you have the opportunity to change it.
TJ, I wanted to actually ask about. I know it's not PHP, but you've worked with Charm a lot to build out TUIs, yeah?
I have, yeah.
And how I've dabbled, but my Go is horrendous, and I know enough to like put together the Wish server, but I every time I try to like build out a TUI with it, I'm like in over my head, and I need to like back out. But how is your experience building out TUIs with Charm?
I love it. It's definitely like my go-to for building a little bit heavier hitting stuff. Mostly just because I like being able to compile it down to a single binary. It's like ultra portable. I can like throw it on GitHub and it will auto build and attach it to the releases and everything. So that's like one of the big factors that like draws me into building like heavier CLI stuff in that. It's great. It's a little tricky to get started because it's all kind of built using the Elm architecture and kind of its like rendering patterns and like its state patterns. So it's like a little steep of a learning curve, but I think as soon as like that clicks, it's very powerful. And I've started like really thinking about building CLIs even in Laravel, like in sort of a similar way, and introducing like some of the sort of like similar state patterns where I can.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some stuff that people build out with it, and it's really pretty mind blowing. It's pretty awesome. I find it to be like a bit verbose, and you kind of get, I mean, for me, not knowing Go as well as I probably should to even attempt to do this, but like I get a little lost in the sauce, like looking at like, you know, the breakdown of everything that's going on. But I don't know, people are there. They're doing some cool stuff over there. They're revolutionizing like the terminal. It's
Oh,
awesome.
for sure. And like having all of the components that they've got, they're like super powerful components. They're gorgeous. Yeah. Like I think that's what really makes it like as powerful as it is. Like the architecture is awesome. Like I think it's great as a framework, but having access to that library of components is, I think, what really makes it.
Because you can just literally like plop them in, right? You're just like, I need, you know, a scrolling window, and this is now a scrolling window or whatever, right? That's
like their pager component. Like I'll use that even. They've got a whole bunch of the components also in the Glow library, which is, I don't know if like a ton of people know about that one over like Bubble Tea, but Glow is kind of like that component library, but for like Bash and ZSH. So like you can kind of use all of that as you're building like other CLIs too. But their like pager component is the same on like both of them. And I use that even for just like looking at like man pages for scripts, because it's got really nice scrolling. It's like beautifully rendered. But yeah, the component library is really where it's at.
Top notch. Good stuff.
Yeah. Check it out.
You bring up shells, Bash and ZSH. How much does that factor into the stuff you two are doing with prompts and?
Not at all, really. Everything we do is more dealing with like the terminal emulator. So like the like Kitty or WesTerm or iTerm or whatever you're using there. Nothing kind of interacts directly with the shell. There's a lot of like weird terminology that kind of gets used probably a little bit interchangeably, including by me, but you kind of got like things like Kitty that I think they're technically a terminal emulator, because like a terminal itself is like the old school like thing where like that was like whole interface, whereas this is kind of like emulating a terminal. And then terminals can kind of like run commands, but most people have the shell, which is like, you know, Bash or ZSH, which gives you this like interactive kind of interface that makes it easier to run commands, but you can run commands without a shell.
Joe's case is probably DOS, because, you know, that's how he rolls.
There is nothing wrong with the DOS shell, sir.
That's how I got started. I accidentally popped open a terminal on a Windows machine, and I was like, "Oh, what is this?" and started playing around with DOS.
I've just hacked Windows.
But in the year of our Lord 2024, I don't know if that's what we're doing anymore. I don't know.
I'm sorry, Jess. I interrupted you.
No, not at all.
No. I think I think it's mostly like. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like the whole Windows thing was the one thing about prompts that I'm still not happy with, that we don't have support for like regular Windows shells. It works fine in WSL, but in Windows, like just a plain, you know, command.exe shell, prompts just doesn't work. It can't work. It's more of a PHP limitation though, rather than a limitation of Windows. It's like a limitation of PHP on Windows, that it doesn't give us access to some of the features we need to do. So like when you're in a shell or a terminal, you've kind of got that flashing cursor that's like ready to like for you to type stuff. In prompts, we need to turn that off, because we're kind of drawing a virtual version of the cursor that's like a few lines up inside a little box.
Okay.
And The other thing, so like we don't have access to that in PHP and Windows. The other thing is normally whenever you type in a terminal, it like outputs everything you're typing directly to the terminal screen. And so we turn that off. There's a special way we turn that off in prompts so that we control that it's output again up there and that and in the different line, not right at the very, very end. And that kind of brings me back to what I was saying with the way Symfony works is it's always on the very last line. And so it just uses kind of the native read line kind of way of like getting text input. Whereas in prompts, we kind of do a lot of faking to have the input further up on the screen. And that's stuff that just we don't have in PHP on Windows yet. There was someone created a PR to PHP to like make it work, but unfortunately it kind of didn't go through. I think it needed to like go through the whole RFC process and all that. And it was a pretty niche sort of thing, I guess. But I would love to see that get revived.
Send me that link because that does nothing about that sounds right.
Okay.
I saw Sarah frantically typing, like she's about to go digging into the source code and find out why you're wrong.
I'm going to try and not do it during the podcast, but yeah, like
I've just.
But now it's a seed planted in your brain that you need.
It is
to,
a
like,
seed.
You know, oh, that itch is there. You can see it. Yeah.
Because I'm like, wait, why is what? And
we can solve this.
RFC.
I've got a whole PR with history and everything, so you can follow it through. And
shoot me a link.
Absolutely.
This is awesome. Nuts. I love this.
While you're doing that, I joked earlier. Is anybody here not using ZSH? And if so, what do you use?
Bash.
You're a Bash person?
I am a super basic B word. Like I do not like.
I totally believe that for some reason. Gotcha.
So it's actually true. Despite so much about my brand, it's actually true.
TJ, I don't know what it is about you, but I just like I envision you saying fish, and I've always wanted to try the fish terminal shell, the fish shell, and I have not. And you just look like a fish person to me. Are you a?
He looks like a fishy person to you. That's a different thing.
That's very true.
Yeah, or somebody who goes to a lot of fish concerts, maybe.
Hey,
I was trying to make that joke too.
Yeah. No, I did have a stint where I tried it out, but I am pretty diehard ZSH. Like that's. I think no. Right now, I'm just running plain ZSH, but I used to use like my ZSH. But I think I've been like carrying around most of my ZSH file for 10, 15 years. I think like it's been like I've been just carrying that from machine to machine and tweaking it every now and then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Joe, you a ZSH person?
ZSH, yeah. Although I mega pruned, I kind of nuked my whole file with my last new computer because I just had like a lot of ancient stuff in there that wasn't even like applicable. And I kind of grabbed like, I don't know, the 20 most important lines that were in that file and just like moved them over, and everything else I just rebuilt when I needed it if I ended up needing it. I do that once in a while. I kind of like nuke things and start fresh to like see what I'm actually using or make sure that it's still all relevant in there.
Yeah,
I do. I do that similarly.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah. This last move from Linux to Mac OS, that actually caught me a few times because I was always of the mindset, and I had been on Linux for years, so I really didn't think that much about it because I'm pretty sure when I had moved to Linux full time from Mac OS. And I just moved over all my dot files and just started using them again. And then for some reason, and I don't know what the specifics are of it right now, trying to explain it. But when I tried to do that this last time, the other way around from Linux back to Mac OS, I was like finding all these little things that like didn't work properly in Mac OS for some reason. I'm like, well, wait a minute, why is this not working? So I actually have two versions of my dot files whenever that happens. I have my Mac OS and my Linux version of the dot file. It's a little frustrating, but
Yep. My ZSH file's got a chunk that is Mac, and then a whole bunch of like Mac specific stuff in there, and then there's like a chunk for Linux, so I can keep that same file going back and forth. But yeah, there's definitely some differences in portability.
I need to take the time and do that, because I'm always like at the time of doing it, I'm like, all right, I'll just make this one change in this one dot file this one time, because this is the only time I'm going to use this on this Mac. And 3 months later, there's like a dozen different changes in that one Mac file, and now I can't port it back to Linux. I need to start doing those conditionals. I'm just lazy. That's really a lot of my problem.
Yeah, every now and then I get in a real like dot file grooming mood, and I'll just like go through all of them and just kind of like garden a bit. I don't know. It just
garden. I love that.
A rainy day, and I just go garden my dot files.
It feels like really good though, like the next day when you go back to work, and it's like this whole new breath of fresh air. It's like, oh, this is like really nice again. There's all these like little paper cuts that have been accumulating over time, and you go through and like fix them all. And then you're like, I'm just coding like at the speed of light right now.
Yeah. There's little annoyances that you're like, I'm gonna fix that one day, and then you finally do, and it feels so good. Yeah. Oh man. All right.
That's kind of the power with all of this, right? Is like you don't have to accept things the way they are. You can kind of go like do things specifically for your workflow and what works for you. Right. And kind of customize it, make it your own, so that it's not just like you're using some off-the-shelf tool. You're using a tool that you've kind of started to like add your own little features and stuff. I kind of think of it like in the real world, like the tools you'd have in a workshop. Like you kind of get to know them. Maybe there's like little tweaks you make to them to make them easier to use. You make your own custom jigs and all sorts of stuff. It's the same kind of idea.
And that's the biggest problem with Vim as well, right? Like you use Vim long enough. I never felt comfortable sharing my Vim configuration, mainly because I steal so much of it from other people. But your Vim configurations are so like custom to the way you work that you can't even explain it to other people, or you don't even think to explain certain things to other people of why you do, something some way. And it's just like that's the thing about being on the terminal. It's like your workflows really become personalized to the person you are and how you get things done quickly. Yeah, I really encourage, if you're watching this and you're not a terminal person, I really encourage you to open up the terminal every now and then, learn a new command. Start with history. History it will be your friend, because moving forward, as you learn new commands and then you need to use them again, history will be your friend, because you can always go back and see, oh yeah, what was that ffmpeg command that I ran?
The amount of times though I've got like a whole bunch of terminal sessions open, and like I don't know how it works, but sometimes you'll like close something and I don't know if it writes some history, but then another one overwrites it. But there's definitely been a bunch of times where there's a command that I ran that's not in my history.
Oh,
it's always
a history
file.
It's dot bash history or dot whatever shell history.
Yeah,
and so that there can be conflicts there. But yeah. Eric, I wanted to say hashtag not legal advice, but I don't think VimRCs count as proprietary technology. You can probably share that even if you didn't write it first.
I would be. I need to get. Like I said, I'm more accustomed to stealing people's. I am targeting TJ now. I've got to get his NeoVim set up, and his what model or language servers he's using and all that other stuff, because it was watching him code his Sparkle on the live stream was just so smooth. It was very nice. And yeah, you can't dodge me forever.
I'll say it on here. I'll commit to getting my dot files published this weekend, but I'll tell you, almost all of my LSP configuration came initially out of Jess's dot files, and then I've like tuned it from there. So I'm definitely a mega like thief as well.
Shoulders of giants, man. That's how we all live, right? Yeah.
Like I always am checking Jess and Michael Dorinda's, like I'm checking your dot files on the regular to like see like, oh, like new little tidbits here and there. Like it's great.
Yeah, Dorinda's another great source. You Aussies, man. You guys have the Vim game down. You're on luck, as the kids say.
I got from you because you sent me that Tmux thing to like swap the like window position, right? Like it was like the Tmux leader and then like the angle brackets to like move and like I use that all the time now.
Oh,
so like
look at sharing stuff.
This whole mutual sharing thing. But
I have curly brackets. I set curly brackets
one.
to move tabs. Yeah. So like the curly brackets will move the tabs around, and then so another good
nice
one.
Yeah.
But like my kind of general rule is like if it's configuration, I don't really feel like it needs like to be attributed, right? Like it's like, oh, you turn this setting on and off. It's like, cool. If there's like some like script, like some logic, some if statements and all that sort of stuff, I'll generally try to remember to like put a little comment in it there of where it came from. But partially so that other people know that I didn't, make it myself, but also sometimes it's just good to know like where you got something from, especially if you've like started to customize it and you're like, what was the original version of this? Like, I have a whole Vim plugin that is literally copied from a Stack Overflow post where someone suggested this whole thing. So I've put it in there. Like this is basically just a plugin of a Stack Overflow post.
The Primogen, we talked about the Primogen earlier. I was watching one of his live streams, and he was asking people for their favorite Vim configuration setting that they have in their vimrc file, and I had shared one with him, which allowed you to like highlight in visual mode multiple lines and then move it up and down. And he did it. He goes, okay, he goes, I don't understand the purpose of this. I don't know if I like it. I don't understand the purpose of it. And then, I'm sitting here like, yeah, it was stupid. I just D it and then paste it somewhere else. What was I thinking? And then like 2 months later, I saw him and he was using it. He was talking about using it. I'm like, hey, I showed you that, you son of a bitch. I had deleted it from mine because it's like, the more I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, I would just like, why wouldn't I highlight it and just D it? And then, because when I had done it, and I probably got that from the Stack Overflow, to be honest with you. When I'd done it, I remember why I did it. I did it because it was at the time how I was like, I would move comments around. Like when I had comment, because I used to do comment blocks, and I would like move certain like comments around to what made sense at the time. But I really hadn't used it in a while, but I used to use it all the time because it just made sense to me to have it. So it was always in my file. And when he did that stream and I shared it, and he said, it didn't make sense and he's not sure why you'd use it. And I thought to myself, like, yeah, I really don't use it anymore. I just mainly delete and then paste wherever it needs to go. I don't need to kind of see where it looks good anymore. And yeah, that was funny. I love that. That's why I wanted to beat him up at Laracon, but he avoided me. It was smart. Did you two play in the basketball game? Did you?
I did, and play is so generous. It's such a generous word.
I
was in a uniform on that court, and I touched the ball. That's for sure. Yeah. They realized pretty quickly. They were like, "This ain't the guy. We got to keep him on the bench." And I was like, tried to tell you that prior to the game, but it's all good. We all live and learn.
I was a faithful cheerleader on the sidelines. No one asked me, and I completely understand why.
I played basketball for much of my life, and then as I got older, there was a time of about 5 or 10 years where I didn't play, and I went to the gym one day, and they were playing, and they're like, "Hey, you want to run with us?" I'm like, "Yeah," because I had a little bit of a shot, and like 3 times up and down that court, I'm like, "What the hell am I doing?
It's so much running. Nobody talks about how much running it is. Why?
A lot of back and forth, man.
Yeah, I feel like this is longer,
and it keeps getting longer every lap.
Yeah, man. It's something. I don't have it. I can't anymore. I'm definitely got like I don't have the knees for it anymore or the desire to do it anymore. But yeah, I so wanted to catch the game. I was up in Oklahoma at the time. I had flown out early and had driven up to Oklahoma to visit family up there, and I had every intention of coming down in time to watch the game. But my mom didn't have the same intention I had, and she won, and I missed the game. But
it was time better spent to spend it with your family. I'm gonna say I don't think you really missed like a lot necessarily.
You really need to know like the word family is objective, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
No. I was happy, but it was funny because when I got to the hotel, there was a lot of very sweaty Laravel people sitting around. I'm like, yeah, I think the game's over.
So for anyone that like doesn't know about this basketball game, there's a company that sells coffee exclusively in the terminal, which is kind of related to what we're talking about. So the I don't know, terminal shop.
Oh, is that their thing?
Yep.
Yeah, they don't like their website is like SSH into here to buy your coffee, and they've built a whole UI in the terminal. You can browse through, add to cart, do your checkout.
Now I gotta go buy some. I just thought that was their name. Like they had a play on the word,
and they have an artisan blend.
Charm.
Yeah, they made a specific Laravel artisan blend for the conference, and so
it's very good.
They, I guess, challenged us. I don't exactly know how it worked. There's someone on the Laravel team who was also on the terminal team. I think he like was kind of organizing the whole thing, and then like Sentry ended up like kind of sponsoring the whole thing. And so
it
started
with Dax just tweeting like
the terminal team.
Yeah, Dax basically was like, "Wouldn't it be cool if this was like I don't know 3-4 months ago?" And then somebody picked it up and was like,
right?
"We're making it happen." Yeah. I think David spearheaded it. Our designer who also works with Terminal. I think he mostly put it together. Yeah.
So if you're listening to the podcast and you go to terminal.shop in the browser, it just says, "Hey, you got to get SSH to terminal.shop," and gives you some steps. This is pretty awesome. Now I'm going to have to give it a look. And
they're using like Charm, right? I think like
yeah.
It's a very slick terminal interface for buying coffee. There's no photos of the coffee, obviously, but
oh my gosh, so
great. Do you need photos of the coffee though? I mean, that's really the question. I'm not really sure what that
looks like. You know? Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know. It looks like Joe's figured out the ANSI photo stuff anyway, so just got to get that integrated.
Yeah, that was.
Right?
Yeah, that's probably the end of the rainbow for me. I'm like, well, if I figured out how to like do video in the terminal, I think we're done here. We can close up shop. Yeah, actually, really, I was going to say earlier, speaking of like, do the different environments matter? I put that thing up, and people were sending me screenshots being like, it looks insane in my terminal, and it's because I wasn't checking for true color support, which is what I needed to check for. And I didn't like, I don't really like batten down the hatches with these things. They're really pretty run and gun. But I was like, but like those are the differences you kind of have to like consider when you're doing these things. Is like what does this terminal emulator support, or what does the environment support that you can still use? So,
original terminals were like black and white, or often it would be green and black. And then I think it was like 16 color terminals, and then we got like 256 colors.
Yep.
And then true color. So like that, like 39 to get the bright red, that's like within the 16 color terminal version. But if you try and send the signal for like an RGB, true color version to a terminal that doesn't support it, you're just going to get random stuff on the screen because the terminal's going to go, I don't know, this isn't for me. This must be for you.
It's a block. It's just random colored blocks. Like it just starts like getting blobby very quickly. Yeah. It's
you kids today with your more than 2,000 characters on the screen at the same time.
Yeah. We've talked about it, but I don't think we explained it. That was your talk at Laracon, right? What was the title of the talk?
I don't know I think the original title was like Talk and TUIs or something, something silly. And it was something of like that. Let's just say Talk and TUIs. I don't know. I don't remember what they actually ended up calling it.
And Joe's application took pictures, all in the terminal. I mean, this was all in the terminal. It was actually, it was funny. I mean, it was cool. Don't get me wrong. It was absolutely cool, but it was funny to hear the reaction of people. Like you could kind of get a feel for like who weren't terminal people.
Yeah.
By like how amazed they were by it. I was like, no, that's cool. But like there's been pictures in terminals for a while. You guys,
Sure.
everybody knows that, right? You know,
Yeah,
it was great. Okay, terminal. I'm hooked on this now. Terminal.shop. Their coffee blends are artisan, which if you're a Laravel person, you understand what that is. Object, with the first object being a lowercase o, second object being uppercase O, which I saw. I'm like, well, they have an error in their code right here.
Same. I thought the same thing for half a second.
Next one is segfault, which I think anybody in computers know what that is. And then dark mode is, I assume, dark roast. Yes, dark mode is dark roast. That's just, and there's a 404 too.
And I love what the 404 is.
I think 404 is decaf. I believe it's missing. Yeah.
Oh, that is so awesome. Yeah.
If they sold teas, I'd be all over that. But
I feel like I'm gonna have to buy some coffee now.
You do. It's good. Good stuff.
Oh,
I kind of want to buy coffee just out of love of what they're doing, even though I don't.
You just want to support them. It's $22. Support them, Sarah. So TJ, I mean, I'm sure everybody has a valid opinion, but TJ, I know, was somewhat of a coffee person, right?
Yeah. We were roasting our own coffee for quite a while.
So you have a high enough opinion of this?
It's definitely worth picking up a bag for sure.
All right, I'm picking up a damn bag. I don't have these podcasts to spend money. I can't let the wife know. She'll never let me talk to y'all again. Feel like, oh man. All right, cool. I will do that after the show. I'm not going to do it now because I would be that guy who shares his credit card on the live stream. That's how I roll.
Guess I'll be ordering some more coffee too.
All right, we are at hour 20. I apologize. I normally do a time check around the hour mark just to get a feel for how everybody's doing. I feel like we've kind of gone past that. Happy to stay on. Happy to keep talking. But I mean, I'm good to wrap up. Where's everybody at, like, here mentally, besides exhausted?
I'm
in
honestly
the middle of my
probably
work day,
good.
so I'm gonna get back to work at some point.
Yeah, they're like, no, we're good. I don't know how I ended up here. Somebody's getting fired. We're good. That's good. I appreciate that. Cool. Okay. Let's do this. Opportunity for last words, especially maybe anybody who isn't used to a terminal, but even people who are. I mean, any last words, opinions? Whatever. It doesn't even have to be terminal related. Just inspire somebody. Joe, go.
Okay, I'm gonna inspire somebody to build a simple TUI. I think you should give it a try. We build CRUD apps all day. Do something different. It works your brain differently. It's fun. It's tedious. If you love string manipulation, oh man, are you gonna love building a TUI? So you should do it. You should give it a whirl. You should just try it. It's fun.
Jess?
I mean, maybe a little bit contrary, but I just want to also say that, like, don't feel pressure or shame if, like, the CLI is not your thing. Like, you do you. Like, you know, I love Vim, but I completely understand that it is not the tool for everybody. It doesn't fit everyone's workflow. So there's no like one true editor or anything like that. I personally, though, get a lot of joy out of the terminal every day. Just feels like I'm really kind of controlling my computer in a way that I just can't in any other way. But as I said, don't feel like you're not a real, you know, developer if, like, that's not your vibe as well.
Sarah?
There is one true editor, and you're not a real developer unless you
MS Paint.
TJ?
Oh man, I would love to inspire somebody to install. If you're not like super into the terminal, give Vim key bindings a shot. It's they're super powerful. They're pretty easy to wrap your head around, at least the basics. And almost every editor has some sort of plugin to give you the basic movements, and it's a lot of fun.
Can I just like add in on that? Like, whenever I hear like Vim keybinds, it kind of like, I feel like that doesn't do it justice, because like most editors have keybinds, and like if you talk about Vim keybinds, people might think like, oh, that's just, I'm just using something instead of like Control C for copy. I'm using a different thing. But the thing to kind of understand about Vim is that it's like a fundamentally different paradigm for manipulating text. So it gives you things like text objects and motions and all these other concepts, and like the whole concept of a modal text editor, where most of the time typing a letter on your keyboard is not actually going to output things on the screen, because most of the time you're manipulating text. And so their kind of default mode in Vim is normal mode, where every key on the keyboard does an action without having to hold in like this kind of modifier, these chorded keys. Mm-hmm. So you're generally never like in Vim, not often pressing 2 keys at the same time to achieve something. You're like doing a sequence of keys. And it's almost like a language, like you're communicating with the editor. Like, I want to change the text inside these double quotes, or I want to delete it. Mm-hmm. So there's a pretty big fundamental shift you kind of have to understand to use it properly. Like, you can just open Vim and go into insert mode and kind of use it like Notepad, but to like get the most out of it, you've really got to kind of think differently. Like, the best analogy I ever heard was, if you think of a painter when they're painting, when their brush touches the canvas, that's kind of insert mode. That's where like stuff is happening on the screen. But the majority of the time, their paintbrush is off the canvas. They're maybe changing what brush or paint. They're thinking about where to put it. They're moving it around. And that's kind of like normal mode in Vim. That's like the main place where you normally are. And then you go in and quickly do a stroke, and then you're back off the canvas again. So
I love that. That is like, that is such a great way of putting it.
My God. Put us all to shame just now. So poetic.
Yeah.
Vim free yourself from your graphical oppressors. You have nothing to lose but your mouse.
Vim, having the modals in Vim was like something for me. Like, the first time I was able to open up a terminal in my Vim interface without having to go outside my Vim interface and not have to run the terminal command, but actually get the modal open with the terminal inside of it, it was mind blowing. I'm like, I'm never leaving Vim ever. I have no reason to ever leave Vim at this point. So
it's a terminal inside Vim, inside a terminal.
Yep.
Just terminals
amazing.
All the way down.
All the way down.
I'll BS it. Just continue exploring, continue learning, continue making friends, and don't be afraid or ashamed to reach out to those friends for advice or guidance. I think everybody on this panel I have reached out to at some time or another, with the exception of Joe, and I discovered he's a VS Code user, so that explains that. I don't.
For now.
Just come from different worlds.
Make friends and just kind of listen and learn. It's amazing. It continues to be our industry and what we do. The last 10, 20 years has just been absolutely amazing. And when you just think there's nothing else to learn or nothing else to do, it just kind of keeps going. It's like that infinite scroll of life. There you go, baby. Infinite scroll of life.
That's the soundbite.
Yeah, Jess might have said something good, but I'm pretty sure that was better.
So if you're in the chat, type bang title space infinite scroll of life. That's a reference to his other show. Where they don't know. They don't know what they don't know what that means. Wrong podcast. Your chat does. Hey, Woods is about to respond to this. He knows.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. That's going to do it for this month. If you're not familiar, PHPRoundtable, we typically live stream the second Friday of the month. We adjust a little bit. Second Friday of the month at 3 p.m. Pacific time, but all of that, we have wiggle room depending on who the guests are and what's everybody's availability. But we've been pretty good. I think this is our third or fourth show in a row, so that's been pretty good for us. So next month, I don't think we have a topic locked down yet. But if nothing else, you know how we roll. We'll just get together and just talk about whatever is on our minds at the time. You two are more than welcome to join. Okay, thanks everybody, and see you next month. Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.